Hi everyone, welcome to the show Fiverpedia. I have a special guest today. I have Jigar Shah from R1 RCM. Welcome, Jigar.
Hey Saurabh, thanks for having me. How are you?
Absolutely, thank you so much. And Jigar, by the way, is a multifaceted personality. I was reading through your background, Jigar. You are an engineer. You're an MBA. You are also a law graduate, and now you lead and are a thought leader in cybersecurity. So why don't you introduce yourself to folks who will be listening to this, how you would like to be introduced about your personality and what you do?
Oh, Saurabh, thank you. Thanks for the kind introduction. You can tell that I like to learn. Let me put it this way, I'm a constant learner. But yeah, I am currently the global head for identity access management here at R1 RCM. I'm responsible for anything and everything which falls under identity umbrella. I like a lot of things. Apart from cybersecurity and identity, I like to do a lot of culture stuff. A lot of nature. Hiking, biking. So yeah. So that's a little bit background about myself.
Thank you so much, and thanks for taking time out to talk to us and share your knowledge and experience. What we typically do is ask few questions, not some of the standard questions you see everywhere, but I try and ask questions which I think are very pertinent. Every CIO, CXO thinks about those and important for business environments today, right? So I would like to learn from your experience and share what you've seen and learned in your journey, right? So first thing, you know what, you run IAM practice. Can you talk about that? In a brief sense, what do you do at what scale? Can you talk about that for like few seconds?
Absolutely. So I think identity. So I have developed. I've actually started the whole IAM practice and function from scratch. In my company, and I was fortunate, to do that because to me identity is very very important, very core and centric in today's world. People say that identity is a new security perimeter right now, and as we all know, and actually as a matter of fact, sort of, I was reading one of the articles and blogs, I think last month, where there were, it was very very, I could validate my thinking, and it was also shocking and interesting to see that there are two main factors, after especially post pandemic, the lives have completely changed. We don't no one has that like traditional boundary or a perimeter they work from. And the two important points which are really attractive to all the bad threat actors are, one is credentials identity, and the second one is your emails and phishing scams, right? So identity is definitely very very important as we speak. And I was very fortunate, with this amazing company. I got an opportunity to start the practice from scratch. So I built a team over the last couple of years, from a very small team to a true global team, where we are in 3 different continents, responsible for identity, as I say, anything and everything which falls under identity universe, which is access management, identity governance and administration, customer identity access management, consumer identity access management, privileged identity, PIM PAM, zero trust, and eventually getting into passwordless authentication, getting into more of data privacy, and the entire ecosystem of identity. So that's basically, I'm responsible for operational governance audit as well as the technical and engineering pieces, from soup to nuts for identity here.
Jigar, fantastic. Now we know that I am, and especially with so many cyber threats coming along, and the hue and cry around ransomware, and again, it's not just hue and cry; it's the reality of today. IAM obviously is in the eye of the storm, right? It's where all the action happens. I'm going to ask you more of a broad question first. What do you see happening in the industry when you look at some of the mid-sized companies to large companies? What are the trends you see in this space? Of course, there are leaders like yourself who are making investments who are very, very aggressive about moving the ball forward. But what's your broader view? Where is the industry today from an IAM perspective?
That's actually a really good question. I think, from the industry perspective, so I have tons of, my peers, my friends, my connections, and on a regular basis, I definitely talk to a lot of CIOs and CISOs and, the people who are, the in charge, for doing this transformational work. I definitely talk to them. And again, it's always a hit or a miss, right? When we think of a large enterprise or a large company, but I was surprised that they don't even have a basic IAM program in place, right? Versus I've seen a very mid-sized to small company where they are so forward in their IAM journey, right? So it all depends, on what journey or what step of the journey, the companies are, so it all depends, how important and how I would say the word, that how do you see identity helping, enabling your business, right? So it's about the culture, right? So that's basically, my reaction. But over the last, 2 to 3 years, I've seen that every company, is taking identity access management as their top priority. And not only just from the cybersecurity or technology perspective, but even from the business enablement perspective. I always joke people, right, that first thing, when you come without access, nothing moves, right? You cannot move anything, right? Even if you do your mergers and acquisitions, or you are onboarding a new employee, the first thing which comes is your user experience in terms of your access, right? Unless you have your simple user ID and password login, nothing else moves, right? And that's how identity is now coming to the forefront, from user perspective, from business perspective. At the same time, as we talked earlier, just a couple minutes ago, from the threat attack perspective as well, that hey, that's the most vulnerable entity right now.
Got it. Got it. Jigar, in that case, what should be the roadmap for organizations who are serious about building an identity and access management culture, really maturing it to a point where it is a business enabler? And we often talk about it, right? And I think you are echoing the same sentiment. That this is not, first of all, it should not be an IT or a information security project alone. For us, we say it should be a business enablement project. This should help you accelerate your business. So what should be some of those practices, some of those steps you would recommend? Because I want to balance some of these questions, right, with your thoughts and then some of your experience on how to action on these. So what should be those steps for these organizations who are serious about it?
Absolutely, Saurabh. And that's a great question, right? I mean, roadmap is, and are you able to hear me well, by the way?
Yeah.
Or is it, okay, good. Okay. So roadmap is actually very important, right? As I said, roadmap is your secret sauce, right? Your strategy, right? How are you doing? What will make your identity program success in your company, right? And I would say identity is complex. It's not easy. It's hard to, first of all, understand. It's hard to implement, and it's hard to monitor, right? So once you implement, how hard to measure and monitor, right? But it's complex, but if it's planned well, you can definitely get the success. So I always tell there's a starting point for identity access management. There is no end point for that. It's always evolving, right? So when we talk about this, roadmap. So roadmap should be number one. It should have, it should start with a business context. Number one, that's the number one thing. As long as you know what are you trying to solve here, That's where your first thing should start. So as a company, first you should do your internal, or even your gap analysis, right? Your internal first assessment, where you are right now, right? Where do you want to go, right? So that gap, that will give you a lot of good insights on where your roadmap should look like, right? Connect those gaps with your strategic vision, or your business strategies, where you think, hey, this is what it really matters to my company. And every company is different, right? Certain companies are regulated, certain are not. So what is that which will stick with your company, right? So number one. Number two, there are a lot of external forces which play a role in identity, right? When we talk about this, is legal, compliance, audit, regulatory, right? Financial, your user, business, customer, and of course your technical and security, components. So you have to have all of those pieces in mind while you're defining your roadmap, right? So that if you're a leader who are visionary, you would be seeing all 360 degrees. Then I would actually start with major components of identity, right? And these are like basic, right? If you don't have an identity program, I think things like, for example, onboarding, offboarding, provisioning, deprovisioning, right? Role based access, your privileged access and entitlement management, right? That's one. Your audit certifications, right? Your customer identity. Those are like five, six, simple blocks where you can always start and keep building over time, right? And then it should happen is, you should have the right governance structure is very important. So in your roadmap, you define who could be your governance committee, right? Who are the movers and shakers, or who are the decision makers in your company who can actually keep you in check, right? That, hey, this is the roadmap, I did it. Am I still going on the right road, the right destination, or do I have to pivot? So you need that critics with you to always keep you in check, right? So that's where your governance committee, especially when you have some blockers or you need support, it's always good to have your stakeholders buy in from day one, right? So that's one. Then once you have the governance committee, you create your identity access management function and in a team, right? So how do you build? There are so many components, right? So as a leader, you kind of say that, hey, this will be my operational team who can keep the bulb on whenever I'm doing some more innovation, because there's always something going on, right, with identity access. Then you should have your governance and your audit committee or a team. Then you should have your engineering and design or a technical folks who are actually deploying your technical architecture and strategy, right? So that should be a part of the roadmap. And finally, I would say, once you have designed all these main components, do not boil the ocean, because if you try to do everything at the same time, you will never be successful, in no matter in identity or anywhere else, right? Be very strategic, use a risk-based approach, pick one or two items which you think that these are the most riskiest, and how I can get so that I can get the results fast, and I can even get people excited within the company and outside the company, right? It's also for your good, for yourself also. It's actually, I would say, like, a boost to yourself, it sometimes gives you the boost that, okay, I did something, so that helps all the time, right? So you can eat an elephant, but one bite at a time, that's what I like about whole that a strategic and a phased approach. And then towards the end, you should discuss what the tools are, right? So tools and should come towards the end. So you should do like your due diligence in selecting what tools, what strategy, if you are into multi-cloud, hybrid, what kind of ecosystem you have, and what is your expectation, so that you can pick the right tool for your right requirement. So once you have your requirements, once you have your capabilities, you match them with the right tool capabilities so that you can have that synergy, and then you start deploying it. So I think roadmap to me is that whole, I would say, journey where you start with the business context, right? Have those important pillars down the line, have those smaller wins down the line, and do not boil the ocean. Be very strategic. Get your application inventory, get your assets together, what you want to protect, and then start building on top of that. So these are like, again, I'm basically preaching to the choir. A lot of people know this, but still people make, mistakes in this, So I think roadmap is your secret sauce on how you do this. What vision and mission you wanna go further.
Awesome. Now, go to the next level of this. So there
Mhm.
are folks who, like you, are very well aware that putting in time and investments, and they've been maturing this. Now, since last few years, we're starting to hear a lot about zero trust. Obviously, the creator of zero trust has been preaching this for close to 10 years now. He's written books and stuff like that. So, how do you throw zero trust in the mix in an actionable fashion? Now, again, uh, my caution always is that we don't want to talk about large roadmap which require millions and millions of dollars of investment, because like you said, it needs to be in business context. It needs to enable acceleration, so it can't be a place where you dump in so much money
Mhm.
without any outcome. So what is your advice when you start thinking of zero trust and making it actionable in the realm of IAM?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Saurabh. And you actually put it in a very right way. Zero trust has become such a buzzword, and so important, especially when you said that the creator actually coined this word, I think around 2010, right? So almost more than a decade, zero trust has been around. But I think I've been recently seeing, especially when I went to RSA and other conferences, I think zero trust was a need of the hour, right? Everyone is getting into that. So very, very, very relevant question. And zero trust means different things to different people, unless you really like, and as you said, you can spend millions of dollars, or you can spend like certain amount of dollars based on your budget, and you can still achieve, if you are very strategic on how to implement, zero trust into your company. So I would actually, just basically, and these are not my words, but I would definitely echo what the founder of Zero Trust, said. And I really like this, I really follow, what he has told, and he uses the word, authentic zero trust,
Mhm.
So, authentic zero trust to me, I really like, I actually like grabbed onto that word, because to me, authenticity, especially in cybersecurity or in the business, is so important, right? And what is zero trust basically, right? Like, hey, you never trust, you always verify, right? That's what people have coined zero trust as. But I think when I hear him, basically what zero trust is the elimination of broken trust model in today's digital world, right? That's what we are trying to do. We are eliminating that broken trust model, right? And that's why we are not trusting anyone, right? So, identity, for example, has an assertion, right? Identity is tangible, has an entropy, right? Is fungible, right? It changes every time, so it needs validation again and again, right? It is behavioral based, it is policy driven, right? So those are, I think, basic tenets, of zero trust. And if you really see, what the zero trust means,
Yeah.
right? These are the tenets of zero trust, right? So I'll teach you. I mean, I'll not teach you, but I'll tell you, sort of, and to our viewers, what 9 steps you need to know. Just if you know these 9 steps, you are golden in zero trust. Are you ready for that?
Yes,
And
of course.
these are not my steps. Whatever I learned from the founder. I'm just gonna repeat. Most of the steps. So number one. So out of these 9 steps, there are like 4 design principles and 5 steps. People need to know. Number one, again, start with business, right? Align your strategy with the business context. Take a problem, align it with your business. So that's number one. Number two, right? You have heard about things called defense in depth, right? If you don't know, so basically what I would say is come up with your systems, right? So basically design system outside and inside, whatever those external internal features are, right? And instead of design in depth, I would say expense in depth, otherwise it will become expense in depth, right? If you don't know what your systems are, right? So that's number two. So make sure that you have that. Number three. Number three is your control access, right? Need to know basis. What do you need to know? So get all those control access points, when you are designing this, right? And number four, inspect all the logs and traffic, right? So inspection, Basically, have you heard about, it's very easy to get into layer 3 and layer 4 of network. But when you get to layer 7, that's where you really have to protect, your applications and all of that, because the attacker can bypass layer 3 and layer 4. But if you really get to layer 7, if you make it very strong, so inspect those traffic, right? So those are your 4 core design principles, right? Let's repeat again. Business, right? Context, business context. Number 2, design your system inside out. Number 3, get all your control access in place. And number 4, inspect, your traffic, right? So these are your design principles. Now comes the actual operational part of Zero Trust, right? There are 5 parts to that, 5 steps. That's all you need to know, right? Focus on your protect surface. So did you see I made a change here? We have always heard about attack surface. What I'm doing is I'm inverting the triangle from attack surface and I'm making it as a protect surface, right? Correct. So, I'll give you an example, so we all talk about so many things. What could be the attack surface? Instead of, as I said, do not go so far out. Focus on what you really have to protect, right? Number 1. So let's say an example, like our president, right? When our president goes for a meeting or something public, what their secret services are doing, they exactly know what the president's itinerary is. The president is gonna come down from the plane, walk this, sit on this, this couch or a chair, can take and greet these people. So they are so focused. They are just protecting. They are just measuring, making sure that the protect surface is there. They're not worried about everything else because that's their job. And who are they protecting? They're protecting president or their family, right? The immediate family, right? So that's what they're laser focused. So I would say focus on your protect surface. So invert that whole attack surface area, right? And then use this principle. What are those protect surfaces? So number 1, your data, right? What your data should be, right? So I always use that. It's called DAS. I use the acronym called DAS, right? So number 1 is data, right? Number 2, A, is your assets, your IPs, your ports, TCP IPs and all that, right? Number 3, your applications, right? What are your applications, right? Your CRM, your ERP systems, or whatever that is. Number 4, correct. And number 4 is your services, right? So your DNS, DHCP entity. So protect your, you have your focus on your protect surface based on your DAS model. So you have data, assets, applications, and services. So that's number 1. Number 2, map all your transactional flows, right? So how the system works. You should know how the systems are integrated and works, right? So once you get that whole integration point, you are golden. Otherwise, you'll miss a very important integration point. Number 3, architect your zero trust environment. So how do you architect this? No matter what it is, right? Is it your private cloud, public cloud? Are you on SD-WAN? Are you on-prem? Are you an endpoint? Are you a SaaS-based application? Doesn't matter. Protect, so you architect based on where you are, right? Number 4, create the policies, right? You need to create a policy, right? So have you heard about the Kipling method? Who, when, what, why, where, how, right? Yeah, just ask those questions when you create the policy, right? And number 5, monitor. I love the logs. That should be the code. I always tell my team, like, hey, I love the logs because they're so important. They give you the information, right? So monitor, measure, and maintain, right? So those are the 5 steps. You focus on your protect surface, right? You map your transactions. Number 3, you architect your zero trust, environment. Number 4, you create your policies. And number 5, you monitor, measure, and maintain, right? So those 4 design principles and this 5, that's basically your zero trust is, that's all it is. You can quickly map, and I'm sure, if you do this to even a business person, they will have a more buy-in to zero trust. And sometimes, because technical folks sometimes tend to get it more complex, So anyways, I hope that was helpful.
Very helpful. All right, that was a fantastic answer. Let's now make it. Let's talk about numbers. Look, you're implementing IAM. Everybody understands the value. You are implementing, let's say, something around zero trust. So all that good stuff is happening. Now comes the time where you start thinking about metrics. How do you measure what you're doing? Number one, are you doing the right things? Right. First thing was about, are you doing the right things? Now we are thinking about, are we doing things rightly? Right? Are we measuring them correctly? And obviously, if you don't measure it correctly, it can get lost. So, what are some of your favorite metrics since you've grown this team and organization? What are some of your favorite metrics to measure that you're doing the right things and the practice is going the right direction?
Yeah, very good question, Saurabh. And again, metrics is really important, right? Like, if you don't measure, you don't know, are you succeeding, are you failing, right? So it's very important to measure, either your success or your failure, and learn from there, right? So for me, how I approach metrics is in a very different way, I approach metrics as, so what? If I'm measuring this, I ask the question, so what? If when you start thinking that question, so what, then it will try to probe you that am I first of all measuring the right metrics? Because most of the, I'm telling you, 80% of the companies or people I've talked to, they don't know what to measure. That's number one question. If you don't know what to measure, then maybe you're maybe either wasting time in something which is not important, right? So you start asking that question. And then every metrics should have a story behind it, right? So if you have to present that metrics to your board, you should be telling in a very compelling, in a way, so that metrics make sense to them, right? That's what I even tell my team, that always do these two things. So coming to your point, Saurabh, you mentioned about what are my sample metrics, what I do, usually I typically go with a traditional IAM metrics, which everyone does it. Like, for example, new accounts provisioned, mean time to provision, deprovisioned. I have lots of, what are my orphan accounts, in the system, what are those accounts which have no owner, right? Sometimes, and then how I can remove that accounts removal, right? Or dormant accounts, then compliance reviews are huge, from metrics perspective. Privileged accounts, which we do, password resets, application accounts. Those are some of the metrics which we are using right now. Depending on hey, what we want to do and where we want to measure, but basically because that metrics helps us connect with our business goals and strategy. So I think everyone should discuss that and see how that works. But that's basically what we do, right? Or at least I do.
A sub question I want to ask you, just a quick question around the same point. Are there any metrics from your experience you've dropped over a period of time or added? Because, and again, I like the way you said it, and this is like storytelling with data, right? And that's what you see on the data side also, where data itself is useful only if you can really tell a compelling story with it, right? So I can see that's what you're doing. But are there any metrics which you felt that, these were, everybody uses it, but it didn't really contribute to your story? Or something which you discovered that, we'll start reporting this also because it's an important storyteller point.
Yeah. So I think when we initially started the program, we were very religiously, and diligently, measuring password resets, that, hey, we really wanted to know what is going on. But over the time, we have this now automated self-service password reset functionality and all of that. So then once we got to that, after a couple months, we thought that, now maybe, it's not an important metrics to measure because most of the people are going through that, and that's not going to affect it directly to our IAM, journey right now. So we kind of like little bit slowed down on that, password resets, because we had a lot of automation tools, in place. And then we realized a lot of like privileged and dormant accounts, which we were not actually measuring, service accounts and bot accounts and what was going on. So we kind of made heavy on that portion. So we added those, into our thing. So we always go back, every year, look back to our goals and objectives, and the current business need, because business also keeps changing, nothing
Sure.
is nothing is permanent, right? Like today the company strategy is something else, tomorrow is mergers and acquisitions, and year number three is a new product launch, right? So while we do our traditional cybersecurity and identity metrics, some of the metrics, we actually like, go up and down depending on the business needs and the changing business strategies.
Awesome. All right. That was fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Now, you started already touching on one another question I wanted to ask you, right? All the security folks I work with, and especially this is from last few years, this has already been happening. That I want to ask you just a quick question around the same point. Are there any metrics from your experience you've dropped over a period of time or added? Because, and again, I like the way you said it, and this is like storytelling with data, right? And that's what you see on the data side also, where data itself is useful only if you can really tell a compelling story with it, right? So I can see that's what you're doing. But are there any metrics which you felt that, you know what, these were, yeah, everybody uses it, but it didn't really contribute to your story, or something which you discovered that, you know what, we'll start reporting this also because it's an important storyteller point?
Yeah. So I think when we initially started the program, we were very religiously, and diligently, measuring password resets, that, hey, we really wanted to know what is going on. But over the time, we have this now automated self-service password reset functionality and all of that. So then once we got to that, after a couple months, we thought that, now maybe, it's not an important metrics to measure because most of the people are going through that, and that's not going to affect it directly to our IAM journey right now. So we kind of like a little bit slowed down on that, password resets, because we had a lot of automation tools in place. And then we realized a lot of like privileged and dormant accounts, which we were not actually like measuring, service accounts and bot accounts and what was going on. So we kind of made heavy on that portion, so we added those into our thing. So we always go back, every year, look back to our goals and objectives, and the current business need, because business also keeps changing, nothing is permanent, right? Like today the company strategy is something else, tomorrow is mergers and acquisitions, and year number three is a new product launch, right? So while we do our traditional cybersecurity and identity metrics, some of the metrics, we actually like, go up and down depending on the business needs and the changing business strategies.
Awesome. All right. That was fantastic. Thank you for sharing. Now, you started. I have my high hopes, especially with folks like you in the industry who are sharing their knowledge, who are pushing the envelope. But again, on the other side of the reality also is we see layoffs in the security space. We also see, a lot of great resignation and things like that happening. On the other side, the number of attacks in cyber, thefts happening, they are growing in numbers. They're not reducing. The war situation, all that stuff raging. What gives you hope, Jigar, when you go to these conversations, when you even within your company, what gives you hope in the cyber security space? What's your view on what's happening in next 4-5 years?
Sort of someone like you gives me hope, who are definitely very interested, to connect with the right people and connect those messages out to so people like you and others, the greatest minds I meet, definitely gives me hope that hey, we are still we are still here, and then there are a lot of things to do, but a lot of positive things are going to come, right? So very, very great question, Saurabh. I think couple things, right? I always tell people that, hey, cybersecurity is more than just a technology and a security, right? Cybersecurity is also about our environment, where we live, right? Our societies, and arguably our evolution, which is always, that whole privacy and cybersecurity goes hand in hand. The stakes are really high, and especially with this whole pandemic, we came from that slumber, a lot of negative things. We saw a lot of things happening where, some of the bad actors have taken an advantage, of the situation, right? With this geopolitical wars and, as you said, great resignations, things like that. But I think, the number one hope of cybersecurity, I feel, is the power of community. You know, we still share knowledge, like the one which we are doing right now, right? We still believe in helping people, not helping. I mean, of course, helping companies, but we believe in making this whole planet, worth living, right? And when we say that, it's beyond this whole cybersecurity, right? And I'm not being very philosophical here, but this is the fact. There are so many people who are there to help each other, right? And that's the biggest hope I feel, the power of community and power of sharing. I've seen it so much in the last 1 year after pandemic. For example, Log4j, right? We witnessed, Log4j incident, but I saw when I was reading through this, a lot of people came forward to help each other. Hey, we can help you in this way, we can help you in this way. How can we remediate? If sometimes some ransomware or something, some incident happens, it's not just that company who is down, but even their suppliers, their vendors,
Sure.
their third party always come together to help, to make sure that, hey, either they are connected directly or indirectly. How can they help the company or a corporation to come? So I think that's number one I see basically in overall industry in cybersecurity, power of sharing, greater levels of collaboration, right? And then number three is, about I always say that, hey, we are moving into this whole era of digital transformation, right? So cybersecurity is now going towards artificial intelligence, machine learning, this whole zero trust we talked about, right? People are becoming more aware, at the same time the attackers are also becoming smart, because I always say that whenever we come up with any solution, there is always someone out there, to compromise that, right? So there is always someone out there creating a vector to compromise, that solution. But we have the power, the attackers, sometimes don't have that power, but we have the power, so unity is very important. So I think things like that, like cybersecurity as a service, I think, this whole AI ML, I always feel that, hey, identity will be now at the forefront, at the center. And at the end of the day, it's all about people. People are becoming more aware about security, about the threats, identity threats happening. They're learning from their own experiences, they're sharing with the rest of the people. So I think that's my basic hope. As you said, question that I'm very hopeful, and I'm very, very excited that, we have the best minds working, towards, we will have challenges, no doubt. There are lots of clouds, as you see, floating around. But at the end of the day, we know that, hey, this is what our ethics say, right? This is what our principles say, and we all stick to that and make the world a better place. So
Thank you so much. And what gives you hope gives us hope also. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience, Jigar. And everybody who's listening, please go connect with Jigar, talk to him. Yeah, again, he's been very open and helpful. And again, please be open to learning from his experiences also, and building a world-class security organization at R1 RCM. Thank you so much, Jigar. Thanks for your time.
thank you, Saurabh. Thanks for having me, and thank you, everyone. Thank you.